Welcome back to some more Corpse Body Book of Shadows. Anyway, let's play. Let's go see if we can dry off our panties, literally, in the girls' bathroom. We're in the bomb shelter right now.
Toilet kana. お札も貼ってないし。変な匂いもしないよね。
The only bathrooms I'd seen up to this point were unusable. Charms on the door mysteriously sealed the room shut. Bodies hanging in the stalls. But this looked like a completely normal bathroom. Certainly the most normal I'd seen getting stuck in a place anywhere. There is a loose piece of wood on the ground here. Take it.
何かの役に立つかも。中に入れるのかな。
I tried pulling on one of the wooden stall doors.
誰かいますか？
I listened carefully for any hint of a response, even going so far as hold my breath.
でも返事をされても怖いよね。
But there wasn't a single sound to be heard. The entire room was dead silent. The walls were made from packed dirt, after all, and there was a lot of moisture in the air. Effectively, this whole place was naturally soundproofed.
よし、誰もいないみたい。あ、
So she can shit in peace. No one would hear her. I backed away from the stall slightly and almost tripped over a fairly sized crack in the ground, about 5 centimeters wide and 1 centimeter thick.
ここに隠してもいいかな。よいしょ。
Finally, I was able to get out those waterlogged panties. Despite being alone, I still crouched down and removed them as discreetly as I could. Then I stuffed them tightly into the crack I discovered.
よいしょ、よいしょ。全部入らないや。布がはみ出ちゃう。もっと大きく広げられればいいんだけど、どうしよう。そうだ、この木で隙間を大きくすれば。
Piece of wood.
ゆかのこんな姿、お兄ちゃんに見られなくてよかった。どうか誰にも見つかりませんように。特にお兄ちゃんには。
Not that Big Brother would be likely to wander into a girl's bathroom, but it was possible given the circumstances. So just to be safe, I figured it couldn't hurt to pray that didn't happen.
でももうちょっと奥に詰めておこうかな。誰かに見つかったら恥ずかしいもんね。よし。
I honestly don't think that someone would be like, oh, I saw that underwear before. It must be Yuka's. No. My underwear was now totally buried and out of sight. There was no way anyone could come across it if they didn't know it was there. Satisfied, I stood up.
スースーしてやだな。
It's so drafty now. She could feel the wind.
でも濡れたまま履いてたらもっと気持ち悪いし。さっきから地震ばかり。ここ大丈夫かな。さっきよりも古い建物だけど 壊れちゃわないかな。
I peeked my head out from the bathroom and looked around.
誰もいないよね。お兄ちゃん、お兄ちゃん。
My voice echoed a lot louder than I was expecting. It actually surprised me, considering the wet dirt walls. I didn't think sound would travel that far.
怖いよ。他にお兄ちゃんの友達とか誰かいれば。臭い。手洗いたいな。
I began walking through the hall once again, this time a bit slower and more unveiling due to exhaustion. Yeah, she barely survived, man. Let's be honest here. Let's go to the birdie pool. The birdie pool of doom. Gotta go fast, baby. The door to this particular room was shuddering, even so slightly. So if there were a breeze flowing against it gently from inside.
なんか開きそう。
Slowly and hesitantly, I put both hands on the doorknob and started to turn.
入れるみたい。よし、入ってみよう。出口につながってるといいな。ひどい匂い。
As soon as the door opened, even a crack, a powerful, horrible stench slammed into my face and twisted around my nasal cavities like a jet of water.
何かが腐った匂いだ。
I was instantly feeling nauseous and lightheaded, as if I were suddenly deprived of oxygen.
もうダメ。早く出よう。水の音。水があるのかな。
Holding my nose, I stepped back into the room and crept over toward the source of the noise. If there were water here, maybe I could wash my hands, I thought.
水、どこ？
My extreme thirst came back full force as well. Clean water was the greatest thing I could have possibly found at this point. I accidentally kicked over a bucket, slipping its contents onto the ground in front of me. Countless flies immediately flew out from the overturned bucket and began swarming all around me. Their buzzing wings sounded right up against my ears, as if they were attacking me. I let go of my nose and began flailing my arms widely, attempting in vain to drive them away.
前が見えないよ。
As I haphazardly stumbled forward, I found my foot splashing in shallow liquid. Mere moments later, my hand came in contact with a wall and brushed against the switch. I heard a faint clicking sound, and then the lights blinked on, and I got a clear look at the room I was standing in.
ここ。死体。
A large portion of the floor had begun dug out into something resembling a pool, which was filled with stagnant, discolored water and dismembered bodies. The bodies were decomposing a lot faster than they naturally would, on account of the wetness Most of them had swarms of maggots inside, or instead of faces. Several bodies had actually washed up on the ground outside the pool as well. Those few that still had limbs looked like they may lose them at any moment. Their torsos were all swollen and black, and everything else was bone white.
なんで死体がこんなに集まって
The closest body was spurting a sappy mucus from its nose and mouth and staring at me with an ugly, mean expression. The thick fluid coming out of the reddish-brown in color and seemed to be a disgusting mixture of blood and dead bugs.
何の音
Some sort of huge door high along the top of the wall opened up, and I could clearly feel a breeze blowing through the room. It was a trash chute.
ここを登っていけば元の場所に戻れるかな今度は何の音何か聞こえる近づいてくる
I was afraid of what might be coming through that hole, so I put some distance between it and myself. Something heavy fell from above, splashed into the pool, spraying my face with rotten, stagnant water.
死体
The body that had just fallen into the pool of water was wearing a school uniform. As soon as it touched the liquid, it began bubbling and meddling into it as if it were a bag of ingredients tossed into its stew pot. One of the poor victim's lungs floated to the surface, giving the whole scene even more of a sick soup-like appearance. I dragged my wet foot on the dry part of the ground for a second or two, then made a dash for the door. As soon as I was back out of the hole, I fell to my knees in shock. I couldn't even move. The smell of death and decay was still sticking to me and still trying to snake its way into my nose. It was all I could do, not throw up on the spot. I hadn't eaten anything for hours, so I'm not even sure what I would have actually thrown up, but I still felt like I had to, more strongly than ever before. So I have a little story for you guys as well. I remember when it was 10 or 11-ish, I got my, I don't know what it's called in English, tonsils potentially. I got that removed. And I remember my throat being so sore I couldn't eat anything. So for 2 days straight, I didn't eat anything, like literally anything. And because it was so painful, I couldn't even eat like yogurt, nothing. So I eventually, my dad took me to the doctor, and I remember throwing up during that time. For 2 days not eating anything. I threw up foam. That was the weirdest thing ever. It was white foam, just by the way. Just giving you guys a little bit of something. If you would throw up and you haven't eaten anything for a long time, it would be foam. Maybe it would have been the best just to let it come out I'm sure I would have felt better afterwards. Yeah, I felt a lot better afterwards as well. By the way, after that, my throat was sore from the stomach acid. And not even like 2 hours after that, I could have eaten something for the first time. But I honestly didn't want to see my own vomit right now. Not after all the other disgusting things I'd seen. I'd had enough.
どうしてこんなことになっちゃったの？
At times like this, especially I really longed for my big brother. If only he were here with me. I cried out for him as if in prayer.
お兄ちゃん、助けて。
助けて。動けないの。
誰かいるの？誰かいるの？あっ。苦しいよ。
There was a little girl here with arm outstretched, begging for help. I rushed over to her side.
どうしたの？大丈夫？
She was faintly glowing. Yeah, it's because she's the one controlling the thing that wants to kill you.
この子、幽霊？お腹が苦しいの。お胸が熱いよ。とっても辛そう。床にできることは、ここ、怪我はしてないみたいだけど、痛むの？痛いよ。
All I could do for her was offer physical comfort. If I rubbed her back, maybe she'd feel better.
ありがとう。ごめんね。こんなことしかできなくて。ちょっと、楽になったの。そう？よかった。
The girl grimaced again, as if she were experiencing some new pain all of a sudden.
まだ無理しない方がいいよ。ね。うん。あなたもここに迷い込んだの？わかんない。気がついたらここで倒れてたの。気がついたら。ずっと寂しかった。そっか。一人で寂しかったね。よく頑張ったね。
I gently brushed my hand against the little girl's face, wiping away her tears. I'd only just met her, but I already really felt for her. She had it a lot worse than I did.
あなた、お名前は？
That Yuka completely forgot that she was tied up and almost died. Like, I think she has it worse off than anyone else right now. She escaped death by a brink.
幸子。幸子。幸子ちゃんっていうのね。うん。私はゆかだよ。持田ゆか。ゆか？ゆかお姉ちゃん？お姉ちゃん？お姉ちゃんか。なんか、お姉ちゃんって呼ばれると照れちゃうなって。
I took Sachiko's tiny little hand in my own and pulled her to her feet.
よし、立てるね。
Sachiko's hand was so thin and light compared to my own. Not just light, it almost felt like it was completely weightless.
やっぱり幽霊なんだ。
Sachiko noticed me staring at her, and I just have had quite a look on my face. This seemed to bother her, so I did my best to force a smile. I'm sure she was worried I'd leave her all by herself again, and I wanted to make sure she know I was here for her.
どうしたのお姉ちゃん。ちょっと考え事してて。ごめんなさい。
Sachiko lowered her head and looked like she was about to cry.
どうして謝るの？幸子、多分幽霊だから。お姉ちゃんと違うから。怖がらせちゃって。ごめんなさい。よかったら、こんな小さい子を不安にさせるなんて。
I took Sachiko's hand in both of mine, turning to her and ducking down a little, so our eyes were level.
大丈夫だよ。幽霊は怖いけど、なんだかあなたは怖くない気がするの。怖くない？本当に？幸子ちゃんは大丈夫。お姉ちゃん行っちゃうの？
I did have to think for a moment since I knew I couldn't take a ghost with me very far. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. I also knew I couldn't just leave her.
幸子ちゃんも一緒にゆかのお兄ちゃんを探してくれる？お兄ちゃん？すっごく頼りになるの。きっと幸子ちゃんにも優しくしてくれるよ。
Her head was still down, but her eyes were peeking at me. She looked nervous, but for the first time since we started talking, she also looked hopeful.
幸子も一緒に行っていいの？もう一人じゃないよ。ゆかが、お姉ちゃんがそばにいるからね。
Honestly, I was lonely too. I probably wanted her with me as badly as she wanted someone with her, ghost or not.
さあ、行こう、幸子ちゃん。
I turned to head back down to the hole, but was stopped by Sachiko's tugging on my uniform. She was wearing a forced smile on her face, but still looked uneasy.
お姉ちゃん、私の言うこと聞く？言うこと？言うことって？
What was she gonna tell me to do? I was so surprised by the question, I wasn't sure how best to respond. But the longer I thought about it, the more uneasy she looked. So...
お姉ちゃんね、あなたのお話なら聞くよ。
That's a great answer. I will listen to any request you make, but will I do it? That's a different story.
本当？だから何でも話してね。
There was clearly something specific she had in mind, but I wasn't going to push her about it. She'd ask me when she was ready. She seemed satisfied with my answer and let go of my uniform. And so, hand in hand, we continued down the hall in search of my big brother. Time for the death room.
お兄ちゃん、やっぱりここにはいないのかな。そうだね。幸子ちゃん、ゆかの他には誰も見なかった？
That's all she said, and then silently, she squatted on the ground and wrapped her arms around her knees.
どうしたの？どこか痛いの？お姉ちゃん、寒いよ。 寒い
She nodded firmly, almost exaggeratedly.
そっか。幽霊でも痛みを感じるならきっと寒さも感じるよね。かわいそう。
As if the show me just how cold she was, she then started visibly shivering.
ねえ幸子ちゃん、何かゆかにできることない？何か。そう幸子ちゃんがこれ以上辛くならないように何でも言って。じゃあお姉ちゃんのそれちょうだい。
She was pointing at my feet.
靴下？
My socks? This was the first time I noticed that Sachiko was walking around barefoot. I was so busy worrying about myself and about finding my big brother that I'd completely failed to pay attention to poor Sachiko's appearance.
ごめんね、すぐ気がつかなくて。いいの。
Sachiko shook her head.
私お姉ちゃんなのにもっと早く気づいてあげられればよかった。
If I were big brother, I would have noticed right away and given her my shoes. But it wasn't too late. I took off my shoes and socks and offered them to Sachiko. They were a little wet, but still better than walking on those cold dirt floors in bare feet. Were they wet of your pee? I think it was. I didn't really like the idea of doing that myself, but just one look at this poor soul's lost soul's shaking form convinced me I was doing the right thing.
ありがとうお姉ちゃん。
Sachiko took just the socks, leaving the shoes in my hand.
幸子ちゃん、靴下だけでいいの？上履きは？うん。だってお姉ちゃんが裸足になっちゃうでしょ？
She flashed a gentle smile at me, which stayed on her face for the whole time. She slowly put on both of my socks.
ゆかお姉ちゃんに怪我してほしくないから。そっか、優しいんだね、幸子ちゃんは。
I patted her head, just like Big Brother always did to me.
お姉ちゃん大好き。
Her smile had grown. It now stretched from cheek to cheek, and I began to feel like I'd do anything at all to keep her happy. I wondered if this was how Big Brother felt when I smiled at him like that.
頑張ろうね、幸子ちゃん。
Despite the severity of the situation, I was in high spirits. I almost forgot how horrible this place really was.
頑張る？うん、お兄ちゃんを見つけられるように。ん？幸子ちゃん？今何か言った？
I thought that was a giggle, but it sounded different somehow. Like her voice had changed to someone else's, or someone else was here.
ううん。
かわいい。むちゃくちゃしたい。
何？何も言ってないよ。そっか、気のせいかな。
What is it they usually say in movies? Must have been the wind? Not too likely in a stagnant underground bunker like this, but still.
きっと怖がりすぎなのかも。もっとしっかりしなくちゃ。お姉ちゃんなんだから。
I put on the bravest face I could manage and marched back out into the hall, pausing only to make sure Sachiko was still behind me. Searching mode of doom. Let's go back to the girls' bathroom. The soles of Sachiko's feet seemed to be bothering her quite a bit. As we stood there, I noticed she was fidgeting in place, trying to not stand on them. She said nothing else. She just stared at my feet. She seemed to want my shoes now, but didn't want to say anything since I offered them earlier and she turned them down. So I just smiled and decided I'd offer them again. I wouldn't accept any objections. I just took off my shoes and handed them to Sachiko without another word. Cheerfully, she slipped them on over her socks. They were a little big on her, but I knew she'd feel better just having them. Sachiko wasn't used to such big floppy shoes. She maybe looks like a clown. She took one step and stumbled forward. Head back to the hole, okay? Sachiko was pointing down the hole towards the spot where the earthquake had dropped me. Sachiko nodded firmly, then practically dragged me by the hand over to the door near the entry point in this underground maze. Energetic as can be, Sachiko pulled me further down into the darkened room. I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my sole of my foot and looked down and see what I stepped in. A nail. Ow. The floor here was accidentally kind of a mess. Actually a kind of mess. It was bumpy and uneven, and there were all kinds of tiny sharp-looking objects scattered everywhere. Not just old rusty nails, but bits of glass, loose wooden boards with jagged edges and splinters all over them. and plenty else I couldn't even identify.
血が出ちゃった。
かわいい。
幸子ちゃん？どうしたのお姉ちゃん。あれ？そっちにいたの？何だったんだろう今の声。
It was a stack of folded up Japanese style futons.
これ何？これポラロイドカメラ
Sachiko found an old oversized instant camera laying around somewhere and was holding it triumphantly in her hands.
眩しい。びっくりした。まだ使えるんだね。持って行ってもいい？いいけど重いよ。大丈夫。嬉しいな。
Smiling from ear to ear, Sachiko carefully examined every inch of the camera. She was an innocent little girl with a brand new toy.
お姉ちゃん、幸子疲れちゃった。この布団使えたら一休みしようか。うん。
Carefully tiptoeing across the little stone floor, nursing my sore and a bloodied foot the whole while. I snacked my way over to the futons. It didn't much like the idea of sleeping on the same room as a dead child, but I had to admit I was pretty exhausted too.
ちょっと湿っててカビ臭いけど、敷いたら横になれるよ。眠い。よし、じゃあ今敷くからね。
As soon as the futon was on the ground, as flat as it would go, Sachiko sprawled out on it. It wasn't long before her eyes started drooping. Just seeing the innocent little girl joyously stretched out like a nap was enough to lift my spirits and renew my hope.
幸子ちゃんがいてくれてよかった。ありがとうお姉ちゃん。こちらこそだよ幸子ちゃん。だって今ここにあなたがいてくれなかったら。
She really must have been tired. She was out like a light the second her head touched the bedding.
かわいいな、もう。いいかもねよ。ずっと歩いてたし、目覚めたらお家だといいな。
I woke to find myself being shaken. Sachiko was trying to get me up, and her expression had gone white as a sheet.
お姉ちゃん。お姉ちゃん。何？
She was on the verge of tears. Something seemed to have really spooked her. Did that huge man find us? Was she attacked?
どうしたの？落ち着いて話して。髪留めなくしちゃったの。髪留め？起きたらなかったの。なんだ、そんなことか。そんなこと。あ、ごめんね。もっと怖いことかと。どこに落としたの？すぐ探せばあるよ、きっと。
The two of us searched every last inch of the room. Me with a wounded foot, but we came up empty-handed.
幸子ちゃん、お姉ちゃんはどうすればいいかな？
The entire time we searched, Sachiko hadn't said a word. I was hoping invoking our sisterly bond might help cheer her up.
髪が目に入って痛い。その髪飾りちょうだい。
She raised the right hand slowly and pointed to my headband.
これはごめんね。これは開けられないの。
As soon as I refused, Sachiko let out a faint, outerworldly groan. In the next moment, her face distorted and changed. She no longer looked like an innocent little girl. She looked well and truly like a demon now.
幸子ちゃん。よこせ。よこせ。
The look in her eyes alone sent chills down my spine. These were the eyes someone who meant to harm and was perfectly capable of inflicting it.
どうしよう。
Give her the headband? Sure.
しょうがないな。じゃあ、あげるね。
I pulled the headband from my hair and handed it to Sachiko. I basically shut down at this point. My instincts had taken over. I was running on autopilot. The act of handing over the headband was almost robotic. That was far removed from the innocent giggle I'd heard up until now. But I didn't even care. I was done. Whatever she wanted, I'd give her. Whatever she asked me to do, I'd do.
そんなに嬉しいの？よかった。
The second I said that, Sachiko stopped laughing, as if to say, if you're glad, then I didn't make me happy at all.
ねえ、その髪の毛もくれるでしょ？髪の毛？そう、お姉ちゃんの髪の毛。幸子、髪の毛欲しいな。え？どうするの？髪の毛なんて。
Sachiko got up her tiptoes and stretched herself as tall as she could manage, then clamped down on my hair with her tiny hands and began pulling. Instantly, my entire world was pain. I was screaming and crying and just wanted to roll around on the floor until it all went away. It was agonizing. I could feel something warm running down my neck, or running down my cheek, from the top of my head to my chin. There were 2 streams, then 3, 4. It wasn't just hair Sachiko pulled out of my head. Somehow, those tiny hands of hers had basically sculpted me. How could a little girl have so much strength in her? The entire top half of my head throbbed. If I had a mirror, I knew I'd probably faint just from seeing myself in it. The pain was making me dizzy. I was probably losing a lot of blood. I knew I'd pass out sooner or later, so I called out for my big brother. I had no idea I actually made any sound, but in my mind, I was screaming.
か重い。
お姉ちゃん大丈夫？
私お姉ちゃんだもんね。しっかりしなきゃ。
次は何をもらおうかな。
After all this, why was I still doing what she told me to? Why was I still listening to her? A wave of sadness washed over me. The top of my head hurt. I knew a lot of it was missing. Sachiko was someone to be feared. If only I'd figured that out a little sooner.
兄ちゃん。
How long had we been walking, I wondered.
チコちゃん、まだ歩くの？
I was following... Oh, sorry, I was reading to myself. I was following Sachiko's despite myself. I had no idea how much time had passed, but it felt like an eternity. And she'd completely stopped answering any of my questions.
もういいや。
She came to a halt.
どうしたの、幸子ちゃん。
She turned and looked at me with a wide, innocent eyes.
幸子ね、欲しいものがあるの。
なに？
What was it going to be this time? I honestly didn't want to know, but the question came out of my mouth anyway, and so I did this.
幸子ちゃんになら何でもあげるよ。
じゃあ次はね、命をちょうだい。
命？
Somehow, some part of me knew this was coming. It was only a matter of time.
それはダメし。
Once again, I couldn't seem to control the words coming out of my mouth. It just said whatever it wanted to say, regardless of how I felt.
私の命あげるの？
She was laughing again. It was wild, crazy laughter. She was ecstatic.
どうして？何でもくれるんだよね。お姉ちゃんだもん。ね。
Sachiko's smile almost seemed to twinkle in the dull light of the corridor. She had the face of an angel, but it was all just a mask.
怖い怖い怖い。やだよ。
I mustered all the strength I had, trying with whatever life was left in me to denounce her words and resist her pull. There was no hope for me anymore, but I still clung to what I could. If I could just reject her statement and tell her she was wrong.
は？
冗談はやめてね。早くお兄ちゃんを探そう。お兄ちゃんならきっと何とかしてくれるからね。だからお兄ちゃんを。
お兄ちゃん？
そうだよ。私はお兄ちゃんみたいになれないけど頑張るから。
兄ちゃんお兄ちゃんってうるさいんだよ。早くよこせ。殺してやる。殺して殺して殺して殺して首に殺してやる。早く死ねー。
幸子ちゃん。
My body shook. and spasmed uncontrollably. I was being overtaken by an invisible force. It was compelling me to speak, to say what would be my very last words on Earth. A suicide note, when you get right down to it.
しょうがないな。いいよ。あげる。私の命、幸子ちゃんにあげる。
I was instantaneous. With one single blow to my skull, was cracked wide open and blood splattered far and wide. I could feel blood thickling out from my nostrils and my right ear. My brain was jutting out from inside my head, fully exposed to the air. But I was still conscious. I could still feel everything. I saw a bright flash of light and realized she'd just taken a picture with the instant camera she'd been holding onto.
綺麗な写真が撮れた。いやしい女。
Sachiko was such a cute little girl before, but now her face was twisted into a hateful, spiteful grimace as she looked down on me in contempt.
そうだ。これお兄ちゃんに見せてあげよう。何でもくれるって言ったでしょ。もう私のお兄ちゃん。
Sachiko began petting my sticky, matted head with her coarse, sticky hands in her mockery of previously gentleness with her.
汚い顔。本当はこれを取り上げるのが目的だったんだよね。
My scrap of paper from my charm.
お姉ちゃんとはまた遊びたいから、ファクトにはしないであげる。また遊ぼうね、ゆかお姉ちゃん。
Oh, there's the ending of this episode. Meyer, episode 6 done. I thought it might have been the wrong ending there for, you know, us dying, but I guess that's not the case. Well, there you guys go. Corpse Body, chapter 6, Meyer, completed. Now it's only the final chapter left. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.